Robbing a former US president without their knowledge and then feeding 6 people to crocodiles afterward? Or sewing domestic clothing from real human skin? Sounds like a plot of a true horror movie. All these horrifying crimes were committed by serial killers. Today we will tell you about the most notorious murderers in the world who have become prototypes for movie characters. Jack the Ripper. Jack the Ripper is the all-time infamous serial killer. Most likely everyone has heard of him. Under this name, an unknown individual operated in the City districts of London between 1888 and 1891. His surgical precision with a knife claimed the lives of around 10 women, from whom he removed internal organs. The nickname Jack the Ripper was given to him after a letter was received claiming responsibility for the murders. There were many letters, each with different handwriting and gruesome spelling errors. The most famous of these was the so-called From Hell letter, which included a kidney from one of the victims. In cinema, Jack the Ripper had a significant influence on pop culture, particularly in movies. Dozens of films have been made about him, not just horror and thrillers but even comedies. The Ripper appeared as a supporting character in the early days of cinema in silent black and white films like Waxworks in 1924 and Pandora's Box in 1929. In 1976, Klaus Kinski portrayed Jack the Ripper in the German film Jack the Ripper. In 1979, the Ripper traveled into the future via a time machine in the film Time After Time, and that same year, Sherlock Holmes pursued him in Murder by Decree. While Jack simply disemboweled his victims, the next character in our story made domestic clothing out of corpses. Ed Gein. Ed Gein was born in La Crosse County and spent his childhood doing hard labor on the family farm. He endured his alcoholic father's abuse, bullying from classmates, and regularly listened to his mother's fanatical teachings, who believed that the world was steeped in sin. Young Gein was fascinated by anatomy, and he carefully studied obituaries published in newspapers as his favorite reading material. As an adult, he began exhuming corpses and dismembering them right in cemeteries. He even took some body parts with him, continuously expanding his collection of skulls and severed heads. To top it all off, the criminal sewed himself an entire suit made of women's skin, which he used as his home attire. Gein was only arrested in 1957, after the son of a missing woman named Bernice Warden discovered a receipt in the store where Warden worked made out to the last name of the maniac. When the police arrived at the farm, they found Warden's body hanging upside down and decapitated, along with human remains and various items made by Ed Gein from the skin of his victims. You can learn more about the life of this criminal from the films Ed Gein, The Butcher of Plainfield by Michael Pfeiffer and In the Light of the Moon by Chuck Parello. Zodiac. Just like with Jack the Ripper, the real identity of the Zodiac killer was never established. The story of this murderer, who became famous for his taunting letters sent to newspaper editors, began on December 20, 1968. On that day, he shot students David Faraday and Betty Lou Jensen, who were on their first date. The Zodiac continued his killing spree until October 1969, and according to some reports, even as late as 1972. If we rely on the killer's claims, he had 37 victims to his name. However, the authorities only confirmed 7 cases, attacks on 4 men and 3 women aged 19 to 29. To this day, it is unknown how many people the Zodiac actually killed and how many were imitators. What's intriguing is the attempts to catch this criminal. The Zodiac killer made his first on-screen appearance in 1971 in Tom Hansen's film The Zodiac Killer. It was believed that the killer was still active during this period, so the film's creators and the police hoped to lure him out to a screening. At the premiere, the audience was handed cards with the inscription, "I believe the Zodiac kills because," where each person could fill in their thoughts. The organizers of this incredible plan genuinely hoped to identify the killer by his handwriting, but as we know, the idea ended in failure. Simple killers aren't as interesting as deranged maniacs, so the next character on our list is a true cannibal. Cannibal. The 1999 film Ravenous drew inspiration from Alfred Packer. There are many instances of cannibalism in extreme situations throughout history, and the film is based on one of them, specifically on Packer's biography. Packer was a gold prospector who arrived in California during the gold rush and was accused of murdering and eating his fellow gold prospectors. He was initially sentenced to death, but later had his punishment reduced to 40 years in prison. He spent 18 years in prison before being pardoned, consistently claiming he was innocent of murder. This cult horror film tells the story of the American-Mexican War period. Captain John Boyd is sent to serve at a remote California fort. One day, a starving and ragged man named Cahoon arrives in the settlement. He tells the story of escaping from a cave where a group of tourists was trapped. Due to a lack of provisions, people began eating each other. But Cahoon managed to escape. Whether Alfred was telling the truth or not, unfortunately or fortunately, remains unknown. However, given that he was released after only 18 years in prison instead of the allotted 40, one can infer that he might have been innocent. Robbing a former US president without their knowledge. This is about the next maniac on our list. Carl Panzram. The next character on our list was a misanthropic, seasoned prison escape artist, highly resilient, and one of the most ruthless repeat killers in American history. Carl Panzram's tally includes dozens of prison breaks and a brutal odyssey of murders and rapes across multiple continents. He grew up in a devout, large German family in Minnesota, but began causing trouble for those around him at the age of 8. He drank, misbehaved, ran away from home, and refused to read the Bible. By the age of 11, he became a frequent visitor to reform schools, where repeated humiliations turned the young Carl into a deeply embittered boy. He roamed the country, stealing, setting fires, and after being assaulted by 4 hobos, he started raping and killing men and children himself. Panzram found himself in an endless cycle of arrests. He'd go to prison, escape, commit new murders and robberies, and then get arrested again. In 1920, after yet another escape, Panzram unwittingly burglarized the home of former US President William Taft. He wisely spent the stolen money, buying a yacht and embarking on a murderous cruise. Killing, raping, and robbing everyone in his path, he sailed all the way to Africa, where he fed 6 natives to crocodiles. Eventually, the police caught up with him and he was sentenced to death by hanging. Before ascending to the gallows, he shouted a phrase that became famous. "Hurry it up, you Hoosier bastard! I could hang a dozen men while you're screwing around." You won't believe it, but the very term serial killer was first used in reference to the man you'll hear about next. Theodore Bundy. From an early age, Theodore Bundy was fascinated by psychology, read literature about sex crimes, and developed an addiction to pornography. Soon, young female college students began disappearing in the college town where he studied. Bundy cruelly murdered and raped women in multiple US cities, miraculously eluding the police. Unlike other maniacs, Bundy had a respectable social status and attractive looks that his victims found appealing. The girls agreed to help the handsome man with a fake broken arm carry items to his car, where Bundy would then bludgeon, rape, and strangle them. In court, Ted was initially charged with 2 murders, but evidence later surfaced of nearly 30 more incidents. However, Bundy's attorney still insists that Bundy personally confessed to him about more than 100 murders, not just of women. During his trials, Bundy managed to escape twice. He jumped out of a library window while studying legal books for his defense, and after his second arrest, he lost weight and squeezed through a hole in the ceiling. During his second escape, he went on a killing spree in a women's dormitory in Florida. The first biopic of the maniac appeared on screens in 1986, while Bundy was still alive, and to avoid lawsuits, all the victims' names were changed in the film. The 2-part TV movie The Deliberate Stranger focused on what happened to Ted after he began killing. The film carefully avoided graphic murder details and instead concentrated on Bundy's double life. Henry. The prototype for the main character in the film Henry, Portrait of a Serial Killer, along with his accomplice, killed and raped approximately 11 people, and those are just the proven crimes. After his father's death, Henry dropped out of school and ran away from home. In 1951, at the age of 15, he committed his first murder. His victim was 17-year-old Laura Barnsley, but he was sent to a juvenile detention center not for murder, but for burglary and break-ins. After his release in 1953, he committed another robbery and murdered a prostitute, leading to a 4-year prison sentence. The film's title makes it clear who inspired the creators of this horror movie: a certain killer named Henry. In the film, the man involves his cellmate in a series of senseless murders, each time devising increasingly gruesome methods of tormenting people. David Berkowitz. David Berkowitz, the son of Sam, a .44 caliber killer, killed 6 people on the streets in less than a year. He was raised in an adoptive Jewish family and had a childhood obsession with pyromania, keeping a diary of his strange tendencies. He served in the military in South Korea, where his main achievement was contracting gonorrhea from his first love. This disease, along with his lack of success with women, enraged Berkowitz to the point that he decided to acquire a large-caliber bulldog revolver and hunt people. His victims were typically young, attractive girls or couples in love. New York City was on edge, and the police even tried to find the killer using psychics. Finally, in July 1977, he was identified through a parking ticket. A well-known film featuring a character inspired by Berkowitz is Summer of Sam, which supports the theory that Berkowitz went mad due to a neighbor's dog. However, the maniac story is merely a backdrop to the film's main plot, which explores the debauched lifestyle of a Brooklyn gang. The role of the good-natured punk creature was played by a young Adrian Brody. The next maniac is a true psychopath, Peter Kuerten. Peter Kuerten was the prototypical maniac in Fritz Lang's M, a film that foreshadowed the noir film style. Lang decided not to include scenes of violence in the plot. Moreover, the image of the killer doesn't appear immediately. The anxious anticipation of the denouement and the need to independently comprehend the details of the crimes made an unforgettable impression on the audience. The German serial maniac has been at work during the first 30 years of the 20th century and admitted to committing 69 murders, of which only 9 were proven. The perpetrator's father was an alcoholic and repeatedly raped his wife and his own daughters. Soon after the arrest of Kuerten Sr., Peter began to show similar tendencies. He began to rape his sisters, as well as killing birds and drinking their blood. He first raped and murdered an underage girl in 1900, after which he went to prison for theft. In 1912, he returned to crime again. Peter used knives, brass knuckles, hammers, axes and clubs to massacre his victims. Andrei Chikatilo. Andrei Chikatilo became the most famous serial killer in the Soviet Union. He began seducing minors while he was still a school teacher and committed his first murder in 1982. According to some reports, his first victim was schoolgirl Yelena Zakotnova, but the Russian Supreme Court excluded this episode from Chikatilo's sentence for lack of evidence. The maniac was interested in children and women. He lured them to deserted places, inflicted severe injuries on them, then killed, raped the corpses and ate them. In total, the maniac killed at least 43 people. The maniac killed his victims as brutally as possible. If the first murder was due to accident, after that, Andrei Chikatilo began to commit crimes deliberately. He raped his victims, cut off their nipples, bit off their noses. He even gouged out their eyes, as he was afraid that his image would remain on them. Chikatilo was sentenced to death and shot. On February 14, 1994, he was executed with a shot to the back of the head. In the 1990s, My Wonderful World or Chikatilo in the Background and Citizen X with Jeffrey DeMann were released. Both films attempted to tell the story of Chikatilo. These were some of the most famous maniacs in the world who became popular because of the movie industry. Thank you for watching.